A century of rumors and waves of official denials have clouded the truth about Stalin's roots. Archival records say he was Georgian, born in 1878 in a small Caucasus town. But as rivals weaponized ancestry, wild theories took hold. Now, cutting-edge DNA research and forgotten documents reveal a startling, evidence-based story, one that overturns Cold War myths and exposes the real stakes behind the question: who, genetically and historically, was Joseph Stalin? In the winter of 1878, a newborn was baptized at the Uspensky Cathedral in Gori, a modest town in the heart of Georgia. The church register from that year records the child as Yoseb, son of Bessarion Jughashvili and Ekaterine Galadze. Both parents are listed as Georgian Orthodox, their names written in the local script by the hand of a parish priest who served the same community for decades. The entry stands alongside dozens of others from the same month, each noting ethnicity, faith, and parentage with the same routine precision. 5 years later, the 1883 census of Gori's population captured a snapshot of the Jughashvili household. The imperial form, filled out by a Russian administrator and preserved in the Central Historical Archive of Georgia, identifies Bessarion as a cobbler and Ekaterine as a housewife. Their son, Yoseb, is marked as Georgian by nationality and Orthodox by religion. The census does not hint at ambiguity or foreignness. It reflects the demographic reality of a town where, in the 1880s, nearly 90% of residents were Georgian Orthodox. School records from the Gori church school, where Yoseb enrolled in 1888, echo the same details. The class roster, signed by the rector, lists him as Georgian. When he advanced to the Tiflis Theological Seminary in 1894, the enrollment ledger again recorded his full name, parentage, and ethnicity without deviation. These documents, stored in the Georgian Central Historical Archive, form a continuous paper trail. Each was created by a different authority, parish, state, or school, yet all describe the same origins. Official documents from this period did not merely serve bureaucratic functions. They reflected the social order of the Russian Empire, which relied on precise ethnic and religious classification for taxation, conscription, and education. For families like the Jughashvilis, these records could determine access to schooling and trades. In Stalin's case, the paperwork reveals a childhood shaped by local customs. As a boy, he was known as Koba, a nickname drawn from a Georgian folk hero, underscoring his deep roots in the culture of Kartli. No surviving document from Stalin's youth, neither church register, census, nor school file, contains any suggestion of non-Georgian ancestry. The record keepers, from rural priests to imperial clerks, were meticulous and often suspicious of outsiders. If there had been cause for doubt, it would have appeared in the paperwork. Instead, the archival trail is clear and consistent. These records, written long before politics clouded the story, anchor Stalin's origins firmly in Georgian soil. They offer a factual baseline, uncolored by later myth or controversy, and stand as the first line of evidence in tracing the ancestry of one of the 20th century's most enigmatic figures. In the wake of the Russian Revolution, Stalin's background transformed from a matter of local record into a weapon for his political rivals. Menshevik leaders in Tiflis began circulating pamphlets in 1917, suggesting that Stalin's father, Bessarion, was not truly Georgian, but Ossetian, a claim meant to cast doubt on Stalin's authenticity as a Bolshevik and his loyalty to the Georgian cause. These leaflets, distributed among émigré circles and Menshevik sympathizers, painted Stalin as a product of the mountains, a man with roots outside the mainstream Georgian identity. The rumors gained traction in the chaos of civil war and independence debates, feeding anxieties about shifting borders and national allegiances. By the early 1920s, the struggle for power in the fledgling Soviet state made ancestry a matter of life and death. In 1923, the Central Committee's propaganda department issued a directive, later catalogued as Circular 47, ordering all party members to reject and suppress any mention of non-Georgian lineage in Stalin's biography. This order was not simply advisory, it formed the basis for a vast censorship campaign. The Glavlit office, established to control literary and publishing affairs, began reviewing every publication, manuscript, and newspaper article for traces of nationalist distortion. Editors were instructed to destroy pre-revolutionary texts that mentioned Gori, local folklore, or any suggestion of mixed heritage. The official line was clear. Stalin was to be presented as a pure Georgian of proletarian stock, forged in the crucible of struggle. The machinery of suppression left little to chance. In August 1935, Glavlit's Order Number 47 explicitly forbade the publication of any material containing unverified information about the origin, family, or early life of Comrade Stalin. Editorial offices and state publishers were required to align every word with the approved narrative. Deviations risked accusations of counter-revolutionary activity, a charge that could mean arrest or worse. By the end of that year, Pravda had printed a glowing tribute on Stalin's birthday, calling him the son of the Georgian people and the Russian proletariat. The article omitted any detail that might invite speculation, instead reinforcing the party's chosen image. Opponents outside the Soviet Union seized on the climate of secrecy. White Russian émigrés in Paris and Berlin published their own pamphlets, reviving claims of Armenian or Jewish ancestry, sometimes citing invented family scandals or supposed physical resemblances. Nazi propagandists later amplified these stories during World War II, hoping to undermine Stalin's standing among both Russians and ethnic minorities. Inside the USSR, however, the Glavlit censors and party enforcers erased dissenting voices. By 1950, more than 1,000 texts had been altered or withdrawn, and the official biographies left no room for ambiguity. The result was a landscape where rumor thrived in the shadows of official silence. Ancestry, once a matter of parish records and school rosters, became a battlefield for propaganda. Every whisper of foreign blood, every hint of mixed heritage, was treated as an attack on the leader himself. The truth of Stalin's origins faded behind layers of censorship, suspicion, and political calculation, setting the stage for a century of debate that would only be addressed with the tools of modern science. The southern slopes of the Great Caucasus Mountains have witnessed human footsteps for tens of thousands of years. Archaeologists working at the Dmanisi site in Georgia uncovered hominin remains dating back 1.8 million years, providing some of the oldest evidence of human ancestors outside Africa. But it is the record of continuous Homo sapiens settlement, stretching back over 30,000 years, that sets this region apart. Layers of stone tools, hearths, and burial mounds tell a story of unbroken habitation, even as glaciers advanced and retreated across Eurasia. The Caucasus became a crossroads for ancient migrations. Early farmers moved north from the Fertile Crescent, while steppe herders journeyed south. Yet, the mountains and deep river valleys created a natural barrier, isolating populations and allowing ancient genetic lineages to survive when they vanished elsewhere. This is why modern geneticists describe the Caucasus as a genetic refuge. In a 2014 study published in Nature, Joseph Lazaridis and his colleagues mapped the unique genetic signatures of the region's peoples. They found that Georgians, Armenians, and other groups preserved a blend of Neolithic farmer and indigenous hunter-gatherer DNA that is rare in both Europe and the Middle East. Excavations at sites like Trialeti and the Kura Araxes settlements reveal a remarkable continuity. Burial chambers dating from the Bronze Age, some over 4,000 years old, contain skeletal remains whose cranial and dental features closely match those of present-day Georgians. Isotopic analysis of bones and teeth shows that diets and local food sources remained consistent for millennia, supporting the idea of a stable, rooted population. Genetic testing of ancient remains from these burial sites has identified mitochondrial DNA lineages such as J2B, which persist in the region's villages today. Professor Anna Jordania of the Georgian National Museum recently described the Kartli region's gene pool as a fossil of the Kura Araxes culture. Her team's studies of ancient DNA from central Georgia show that over 85% of modern inhabitants share direct genetic links with people who lived in the area 3,000 years ago. This level of continuity is rare, even in other mountainous regions of Eurasia. Population geneticists now estimate that more than 80% of the genetic material found in Kartli and surrounding areas can be traced back to the Bronze Age and earlier. The landscape itself has helped preserve these ancient lineages. The high mountains, deep gorges, and isolated valleys of the Caucasus limited the movement of invading armies and migrating tribes. While waves of Scythians, Persians, Greeks, and Mongols swept across the plains to the north and south, the core populations of Georgia remained relatively undisturbed. Over time, this isolation fostered not just linguistic and cultural diversity, but also a mosaic of genetic identities found nowhere else on Earth. Today, the Caucasus stands as one of the most genetically diverse regions in the world. Modern population studies show that Georgians share certain markers with their neighbors, but also possess unique clusters that set them apart from Slavic, Turkic, or Middle Eastern peoples. Subtle differences even exist between western and eastern Georgia, shaped by the geography and history of each valley and mountain pass. These findings offer a scientific foundation for understanding how Stalin's own ancestry could be anchored in a population whose roots reach deep into the prehistoric past, shaped by the enduring shelter of the Caucasus. Geneticists working with modern population data have turned to the region around Gori, Stalin's birthplace, to address the long-standing debate over his ancestry. Without direct DNA from Stalin himself, scientists rely on a combination of statistical modeling, regional genetic profiles, and the analysis of living descendants. The most significant breakthrough came from a Y-DNA test on Alexander Berdyansky, Stalin's grandson through his son Vasily. The results place Berdyansky, and by extension Stalin's paternal line, firmly within the G2A1A haplogroup. This marker is not just common in Georgia, it is especially prevalent in the Kartli region, where Gori is located. In Kartli, about 35% of men carry the G2A-Y chromosome, a frequency that stands out even in the genetically diverse Caucasus. Population geneticists use this information to create models that estimate the likelihood of different ancestral origins. By comparing Berdyansky's Y-DNA profile to large regional datasets, researchers can assign probabilities to his ancestral background. The data show a 93% probability that a male with this genetic signature, born in Gori in the late 19th century, would be of Georgian descent. This figure comes from clustering algorithms that analyze hundreds of YSTR markers and compare them to thousands of samples across the Caucasus. The remaining probability accounts for small but measurable overlap with Ossetian and Armenian populations, an expected result in a region marked by centuries of migration and intermarriage, but not enough to challenge the overwhelming Georgian signal. Dr. Nino Seratelli, a population geneticist at Tbilisi State University, explains that the G2A1A haplogroup is a genetic thread running through the heart of Georgia for millennia. She points to studies showing that the same branch found in Berdyansky's DNA appears in ancient burials excavated near Gori, with continuity stretching back at least 3,000 years. When the Berdyansky sample is run through the latest Bayesian models, it clusters tightly with modern Kartli samples and sits apart from the Ossetian and Armenian clusters. This separation is not absolute. No genetic boundary ever is, but the statistical weight is clear. The Djukashvili line, as far as current science can determine, fits squarely within the Georgian genetic landscape. The absence of direct DNA from Stalin himself is a limitation, but the methods used by population geneticists are robust. Y chromosome inheritance is direct and unchanged from father to son, making it a reliable tool in cases where personal samples are unavailable. The confidence in the 93% figure is reinforced by the breadth of the regional dataset and the precision of the genetic markers involved. Even if Stalin's own DNA were to be tested, the odds are high that it would match the profile already seen in his grandson and in the Kartli population at large. These findings do more than settle an old controversy. They demonstrate how modern genetic science can cut through decades of rumor and propaganda, restoring a factual foundation to the story of Stalin's origins. The numbers are not just statistics, they are the residue of thousands of years of human settlement, migration, and survival in the Caucasus. In the end, the genetic evidence returns the story of Joseph Stalin to the soil of Gori, anchoring his ancestry in a population that has endured, largely unchanged, since the Bronze Age. Joseph Stalin's physical presence carried silent reminders of his origins. His left foot bore fused second and third toes, a condition known as syndactyly. In Georgia, syndactyly appears in about 4% of the population, noticeably higher than in most of Europe. Kremlin medical files, kept under strict secrecy until decades after his death, document this trait, along with his short stature and the pockmarks left by childhood smallpox. These features were not unique in Gori or the surrounding Kartli region. Regional medical surveys from the early 20th century list similar cases among Georgian highlanders, and geneticists today associate such anomalies with the same ancient populations identified in DNA studies. Stalin's thick Georgian accent, never fully erased by years in Moscow, set him apart in Kremlin circles. Colleagues and rivals alike remarked on his clipped, foreign-sounding Russian. Historian Simon Sebag Montefiore has argued that these outward signs, his accent, his feet, his scars, were constant reminders of his outsider status. They shaped how others saw him and how he saw himself, fueling a lifelong sense of vigilance and distance. Stalin's medical and physical records, when read alongside population genetics, draw a line from the mountains of Georgia to the corridors of Soviet power, anchoring his identity in the reality of his body as well as his birth. World War II produced a generation of leaders whose origins became part of their legend and their political battles. Rumors of hidden ancestry followed not just Stalin, but also Churchill, Hitler, and Roosevelt. In 2023, a global survey of biographies and news archives found that 68% of major wartime leaders faced public claims about secret or falsified ancestry. Only 12% of those cases were ever clarified by genetic evidence or direct archival proof. For Stalin, the science of DNA has helped cut through decades of speculation, but even the most advanced genetic tests have their limits. DNA can confirm a paternal lineage or reveal ancient migrations, but it cannot explain ideology, personal ambition, or the choices that shaped the 20th century. Genetic history provides a powerful tool for understanding roots, yet it cannot answer every question about identity or destiny. The story of Stalin's ancestry, like those of his contemporaries, shows how myth and evidence can collide, and how science can illuminate the past, even as some mysteries remain beyond its reach. Today, science rewrites the boundaries of historical identity, long after propaganda tried to erase them. DNA doesn't excuse or condemn, but it does restore truth to lives shaped by myth. In an era flooded with misinformation, evidence matters more than ever. When rumor fades and data remains, history gains clarity, if we're willing to look. What do you think science should uncover next? Share your thoughts below.